What's up, Sooner Nation, and welcome to another edition of the WhackoPreview Podcast, where we go over all things OU football going into the weekend of matchups ahead. I'm Steve Curtis, the voice behind Wacko Sooners, and today we're going to be talking about the incredible defenses that are going to be facing off in the Cotton Bowl here tomorrow. We're also going to talk John Mateer's injury, his availability, that whole situation, what we all really care about. And finally, we're going to go through my predictions for the SEC matchups we have this weekend. We're going to break it all down right here on Wacko Sooners. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell button so you never miss an episode. Plus, remember, you can follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all at Wacko Sooners for live news updates, game time highlights, and of course, a few memes and reels to keep it lighthearted and fun like we like it here in Sooner Nation. So go hit those follows. Make sure you are always in the Wacko loop. All right, so let's go through these defenses that are facing off, right? So we've talked a lot about Oklahoma's defense here in the last week and a half, just with how well they're doing. And we've talked a lot about the intangibles that we've been talking about, just the culture and how proud we are of that. David Stone, earlier this week in a post-practice interview, some of our defensive line guys were asked, how's all that going? And they did mention that one David Stone, the big old number 0, 5-star recruit out of high school, sophomore, he went and named the defensive line the Dog Pound. I love this guy. I love this guy so much. Oh, man. Love that. And BV's response to that was, what do you think of them calling themselves the Dog Pound? Oh, well, just glad that they're taking ownership and really owning what they are and what they're doing. If they were playing like a bunch of pansies, then it would be totally different. Love that out of BV. That's the only. I wouldn't expect BV to play into that like, oh yeah, that's awesome how they call themselves the Dog Pound. They're the dogs. They put in the pound. Yeah, that's not Brent. But we are just going to run through our defensive stats a little bit here, and then we're also going to go through Texas's. So first off, Oklahoma's. Through the first 5 games of the season, they have allowed a grand total of 965 yards. All right, that's 592 pass, 373 rush. So in those 3 categories, an average allowance of 193 yards per game against opponents. We've allowed that many. An average of 118.4 passing yards per game is allowed, and an average of 74.6 rushing yards is allowed per game. So this defense is doing a pretty dang good job. I don't want to hear they've played 3 cupcakes. Oklahoma has played the same relative kind of schedule that Texas has, right? Texas played a great Ohio State team, 3 cupcakes, and objectively, at this point so far, a not great Florida team. In fact, a bad Florida team. Oklahoma has played Illinois State, Temple, and Kent State, 3 cupcakes, just like Texas. They played Michigan, who is albeit not as good as Ohio State, but they're better than Florida. And Auburn, who in many respects, I think on the defensive line especially, is better than Florida in many respects. I think there's a lot of different trade-offs there. But ultimately, these schedules are somewhat comparable, so I don't want to hear the Oklahoma stats are padded because they've had a much easier schedule. Texas had one really great P4 opponent and a bad P4 opponent when they faced off. Oklahoma faced 2 pretty good P4 opponents at the time that they faced them. So, comparable in my opinion. As for the rest of Oklahoma's numbers, so we've allowed a grand total of 36 points in 5 games. So that's a total of about, 36 divided by 5. That's like 7.2 points per game. 296 tackles. Grand total, 21 sacks for 113 yards. That's second in the nation, first in the SEC. 14 quarterback hurries, 50 tackles for loss for 191 yards, 14 pass breakups, 1 singular interception by Jaydn Hardy last week against Kent State, and 1 singular fumble last week also against Kent State made by R. Mason Thomas, taken in for a scoop and score touchdown by one G-Baby Grayson Halton. Love those guys. Love the guys on that defensive line. And, of course, we went through all of Oklahoma's defensive rankings on the Wacko Weekly back on Wednesday. We went through their rankings in the national scale of things, leading in most every single stat in the book, right? Total defense, opposing yards per play, sacks per game. Literally, in those major 17 categories that we went through, top 5 or better. Well, leading first in, the first 6 in the nation, therefore first in the SEC. Second in, I think, 8 or 9 of them. Yeah. 8 of them. Second nationally, first in the SEC in all of those. And then the final ones for rushing touchdowns allowed were third nationally, first in the SEC. In total rushing defense, were 5th in the nation, second in the SEC. And opposing pass completion percentage were 6th nationally, 3rd in the SEC. So this is an elite defense. It is the number 1 defense in the country based on all metrics at this moment in time. Now, Texas' defense against Ohio State looked great. Looked great. Held them to 14 points under, I think it was under 200 yards. I can fact check that real quick. Actually, let's go ahead and do that so I'm not lying. Let's see. Total team stats. Okay. Ohio State had just over 200. They had 203 total yards, 126 passing, 77 rush, with an average of 3.8 yards per play. Texas outgamed them with 336 total yards, 170 passing yards, 166 rush, 5 per play, and still lost. So efficiency is an issue for that Texas offense, and we talked about the Texas offense on Wednesday in Wacko Weekly. So let's break down the Texas defense. On the season, through their first 5 games, they've allowed a grand total of 1,305 yards, an average of 261 total yards per game. 903 pass yards, that's an average of 180.6 per game, and 402 rush yards in 5 games, an average of 80.4 per game. Now, the rest of those defensive numbers, 60 total points allowed, that's 12 per game. 316 tackles, which tells me that their defensive line is not doing their job and letting guys get behind them and leave the linebackers and the corners to deal with it. They've got 9 sacks on the season for 46 yards, 14 hurries, or no, I believe it was 21. I may have missed that. Then 25 tackles for loss, so 90 yards on those. 17 pass breakups. They've taken 5 interceptions and 3 fumbles for a grand total of 8 total turnovers so far this season, none of which have been returned for defensive touchdowns. So, looking at this, Oklahoma has allowed 350 fewer yards. They've allowed approximately 300 fewer pass yards and 28 fewer rush yards this season. They've allowed 24 fewer points. The defensive line has done such a good job of stuffing that they've also had 20 fewer tackles. They've had 21 sacks compared to 9 for a lot of yards. They've had fewer hurries, but not by a lot. And a lot of that can also be chalked up to simply they can get home and get the sack instead of just hurry. We have twice as many tackles for loss for 100 more yards, 3 fewer pass deflections, and 6 fewer total turnovers. But again, you look at all those metrics that we talked about Wacko Weekly on Wednesday. This Oklahoma defense is even better than Texas, in my humble opinion. And we're going to have a field day against Arch Manning. And I think that Oklahoma's offensive line has done enough in pass protection, and we gave some guys some time off. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit once we get more into Mateer and the whole injury status and just our final thoughts before the game on Saturday tomorrow. Is just we'll go through some more of that. Arbuckle's going to have a lot of stuff cooked up. The offensive line's going to do a great job in my pre-game thoughts. I think they're going to look pretty good because remember, they've looked bad against the crappy teams, or I don't want to say crappy, the lesser cupcake teams that Oklahoma has played. The offensive line has played poorly, but they've risen to the occasion. They rose to the occasion against Michigan, allowed I think only 2 sacks, rose to the occasion against Auburn, allowed only 1. And did what they needed to do in that game-winning drive that Mateer took the team down on to take it to 22-17, setting up the safety by R. Mason Thomas. So, I think this Oklahoma defense, particularly the defensive line, the front 7 entirely really, is going to have a field day. They're going to mask the bit of deficiency that Oklahoma has in the secondary. And when I say deficiency, I just mean inexperience in Cortland Guillory and size in Eli Bowen. I think Eli Bowen's going to do great. He's going to show out because historically, Red River is a game where Oklahoma players just burst onto the scene nationally and show out and show the world who they are. Marvin Mims had that in 2021. Oklahoma fans already knew who he was. The world found out who Marvin Mims was that day in 2021 with Caleb Williams. Drake Stoops had his breakout day in 2020. Jaleel Farouk in 2023 had a great day. Kip Lewis, that 2023, Red River 2023 was the first time I heard Kip Lewis's name on that goal line stand when they put him in there on that second and goal. So I just think that our defense is going to outplay theirs, and I think that our offense is going to do what it needs to do. I think there may be some turnovers in this game from the offenses. I think both defenses will get at least one turnover. I ultimately think Arch is going to make more critical mistakes. And if anyone can confuse a young quarterback with their defense, an experienced quarterback even, but if there's anyone who thrives off of confusing quarterbacks with different looks on a defense, it is Brent Venables. No one does it better. No one is more creative. No one is more intense. Kirby Smart and Jim Knowles are up there when it comes to DC minds. But right now, Brent Venables has created a monster. And I think that it's going to outplay the Texas offense. And I think the Texas defense, if they showed up against Oklahoma tomorrow like they did against Florida last week, Texas is getting destroyed. Do I think that they're going to show up that lazy? No. I think that Texas has been working towards this a little bit harder than they were working towards Florida. I think they were looking ahead a little bit, not super much to the point where they were ignoring Florida. But I think that Texas will show up much better this week in a better mindset than they did last week against Florida. All right, John Mateer. We're going to make this brief because it's not even a lot of numbers or anything like that. It's just opinions. But we've been talking about the whole John Mateer situation for weeks here at Wacko Weekly since the injury happened against Auburn. So we talked on Weekly on Wednesday that the team's been practicing inside in the Everest Center all week. All week. Brent's been saying it's due to the AC. No, I don't believe that for a minute. Then Wednesday, the injury report comes out. John is listed as doubtful. As of Thursday, yesterday, John is listed as probable. As probable. I'm so excited. We are getting John Mateer back for Red River. I'm certain of that at this point. I know that previously I've talked about, I'd be okay if he sat out because, if he sits out a bunch of games, he'll probably come back. Possibility that's very real. And yeah, I'd love to see that in terms of long-term picture. I love trying to be a big picture thinker here, thinking long-term investment. But ultimately, the fan in me is taking over. I want to see the kid play. I want to see him go out. I want to see him rip this Texas team apart. I want us to go to war. And I want us to bring the head of the Longhorn home to Norman and hang it up outside Gaylord Family Memorial Stadium as a sign, Oklahoma's here, get out, we're going to kill you. In football terms, figuratively in football terms, we're going to destroy anyone we come across, anyone we play. So, I'm really excited for that. Right now, Texas is a 1.5-point favorite. Vegas is just trapping people, I think, at this point. If Mateer plays, and I guarantee you, I am betting that Mateer will play. And he's the argument of, he probably can't play, it's post-op, blah, blah, blah. He played 3.5 quarters against Auburn when this was a fresh break in his thumb, when that base metacarpal broke. He played for 3.5 quarters, completed 16 of his last 17 passes in that game, including a 30-yard bomb to Isaiah Satania on that game-winning drive where he had 4 straight completions in that last drive. 2.5 weeks post-op with screws in that thumb joint, and he's had weeks to heal. And the therapy, the PT for this injury, from what I've been told, is they're coming up with all sorts of creative ways to improve his grip strength without stressing his thumb too much to make sure that ball security is not an issue. Because, if Oklahoma's playing John Mateer, they're comfortable in his ball security. Like, forget turning the ball over like in an interception, but what if his hand gets hit and he drops the ball? They're not going to play him if they're worried about that. And I bet you they're going to play him, which means that they're not worried about it. Now, will we see a lot of John holding it in his left hand when he takes off to run? Probably. I think you'd be stupid not to, just to avoid that right thumb getting hit somehow, because no doubt Texas guys are going to try putting their helmet to his hand and re-aggravating that injury, which, it's football. People can call it dirty. No, that's the game. You know your opponent has a weakness. You hit it every time you can. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, when it comes to football. But I think regardless, John is going to play. Even if he doesn't feel like 100%, he's not going to tell anyone. He's going to tell them he's 100%. He's going to go out. He's going to play. Dude's a warrior. Dude is an absolute monster on the field when it comes to gritting his teeth, going through it. Because no one knew about the injury in the first place until Monday. The game was Saturday. No one knew about it for 3 days. All right? And he played through it. Nobody knew, except probably the coaches when it happened. So this guy's tough. He's going to come in. He's going to do his job. And we will get into my score prediction here in our next segment when we go through our wacko picks. So other things about this offense that we're going to be doing, I think, tomorrow is, I think Jaydn and Tory Blaylock, they're going to be working pretty hard. I think that Jaydn, granted it was Kent State, but I think he had a really good performance. In terms of what we hadn't seen from him yet, I'm optimistic. It wasn't exactly what I wanted out of him in terms of yardage, but I'll take what I can get, a positive upward trend. Granted, again, Kent State. But Florida's rushing offense last week going into their matchup against Texas, they were ranked 13th in the SEC in rushing attack. Oklahoma going into last week was 12th in the SEC. And that was without Jaydn firing on all 4 cylinders. I think Jaydn and Tory Blaylock get a lot of work. We may see some Xavier Robinson, Javonte Barnes, and just have those 4 guys in and out. Taylor Tatum, he's still out with a hamstring injury and not, from what I've been hearing lately, not doing everything he needs to be doing. And that the love for football isn't there. It's more there for baseball because, remember, he also plays baseball, and that's where the hammy injury came in. I think that we're going to see a decent blend of our top 4 running backs on Saturday. A lot of Jaydn and Tory Blaylock, but also see some X-Rob and some Joe Barnes in those certain 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1 maybe situations where we need just a good power back that just plows through. And that's the one time I will say that Javonte Barnes will get the ball, head down, just go straight forward. That's the one time I'll say that is a positive. Just a guy that he's big, he's tough, he's strong, goes down and gets to it. Arbuckle, he's going to be pulling into his bag of tricks. All right? He's going to be cooking up all sorts of stuff that we have not seen all year through the first 5 games of the season. Because that Texas secondary, because Malik Muhammad's coming back, is going to be nasty. But he's got a committee of pass catchers. From Deion Burks, Isaiah Satania, Javonnie Gibson, maybe Keontez Lewis, who's questionable. No, he's still doubtful. No, he is questionable on the injury report. Keontez Lewis is questionable on the injury report. John Mateer is now probable. Keontez Lewis, if he comes back after that hit against the wall. Deion Burks, Isaiah Satania, Javonnie Gibson, Zion Kearney, Ivan Carrion, maybe Elijah Thomas even, Jaren Kanak, Caden Helms. You've got a whole crowd of guys that are all good at catching the ball. Now, I have yet to see any of them. Well, Jaren Kanak is a star tight end. He's the number 2 tight end in the nation when it comes to total receiving yards, behind Michael Trigg at Baylor. But Jaren's a stud. Absolutely. He's a star. Deion Burks is good. Isaiah Satania, good. Javonnie Gibson, good. Elijah Thomas, young, we haven't seen a lot. Zion Kearney, from what we've been hearing, good. Ivan Carrion, big guy, good. Caden Helms. Brent had so much to say this week about how much he loves Caden Helms, especially how good he is at blocking. So I think we'll see Caden Helms cut into Jaren's snaps a lot in the blocking a bit to help John with some bigger play action passes or in the run game even, because Jaren's still kind of figuring out that blocking situation. But ultimately, Texas' secondary is going to have to double up on somebody in this Oklahoma receiving core. They're going to have to, and also Javonte Barnes can catch. Jaydn can catch. Xavier Robinson against Temple, he went and caught a touchdown pass. You've got a ton of good guys at pass catching positions, at those skill positions that you need. You have a ton of guys that are pretty good. Other than Jaren Kanak, I have yet to see one that's a total star. And that's not saying that there aren't in that room. I just haven't seen it yet. Someone's going to have to be doubled up in coverage, and that means someone else is going to have an opportunity. And if we know anything about John Mateer, he doesn't care who he's throwing to as long as they're open and they catch it. So you're going to see a lot of balance when it comes to targets this week, or I guess tomorrow, not this week necessarily, but you're going to see a lot of balance in who he's targeting and who's getting catches. I think the whole pass catching crew has a good day in the collective. And no one is going to stand out because they're all doing so good as a group. It's spreading it out and the balance is there. I think Jaren Kanak gets his first offensive touchdown on Saturday. I think that Jaren is finally going to get that first touchdown that he wants so bad, because he wants that one from Michigan back so bad that he just stopped running a little too early. He wants it back so bad. And I think that this is going to be a crazy game. I think you're going to see some crazy stuff because this game's always crazy, or almost always crazy. 2022 and 2024, not crazy. It was terrible. But this game's crazy. It always will be. Javonnie Gibson, I think, is going to have a pretty good day. He might be wide receiver 1 at the end of the day. I think Jaydn Ott's going to have a good day. And I think Mateer, with his performance tomorrow, comes right back into that Heisman race and goes right back up to the top of the list, coming back right off this kind of an injury and putting up some good numbers. I do still think it will be close, and we will get into that here as we go into our Wacko Picks of the Week. So just going to go through our picks for SEC games, and this includes non-conference matchups. So first, Alabama, Missouri, up there in Columbia. Right now, ESPN has Bama as a 2.5-point favorite. Ty Simpson and Bo Prabula are both awesome. And that Missouri running back, Ahmad Hardy, I think is his name. Let's double check this. I should know this. Yeah, Ahmad Hardy. Okay. I was 99% sure that was his name. I just wanted to be doubly sure because I don't follow Missouri nearly as closely as I should. But Ahmad Hardy is probably the best running back in the country. I think this Alabama defense has really tightened down since last year. I think that the offense has gotten more consistent. Kalen DeBoer has found his guy in Ty Simpson. I do have Alabama to win. I do have them to cover. I think they're going to win by 10. Give me Alabama 28, Missouri 18. Washington State at Ole Miss down there in Oxford. Ole Miss is a 31.5-point favorite per ESPN. Trinidad Chambliss. Oh my gosh. Where did this guy come from? Like, this just came in out of nowhere for Austin Simmons and has since been tearing it up. Had his way with LSU. Absolute stud. I think this entire Ole Miss team is actually way better than we gave them credit for. I think they're better than last year at this point with Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart was pretty good, honestly. He wasn't as quick as you might have liked him. Sometimes cracked under the heavy pressure and had some bad turnovers, which cost them games, which cost them a spot in the playoffs. I think Washington State, good old Wazoo. God knows I love them because they gave me John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle and John Kuzieski. But Wazoo's a bag of bones that's being propped up like a puppet. I do have Ole Miss to cover that 31.5-point spread. I have Ole Miss 45-13. Arkansas at Tennessee. Woo Pig going into Rocky Top. Sam Pittman's gone. I'll tell you what. I think Arkansas is still bad. I think Taylon Green's fine. I think he's actually pretty good. I just think everything around him at Arkansas is not good. I think that Joey Aguilar and Josh Heupel are a match made in heaven. Joey just plays with a lot of pizzazz, for lack of a better word, a lot of juice that fits what Josh likes to do. And sure, that causes a couple turnovers here and there. Took it down to the wire in overtime against Mississippi State. Lost to Georgia there at the end of the fourth quarter. But I do have Tennessee to cover, 11.5-point spread. I've got Taylon Green and Bobby Petrino coming back out of the woodwork in Arkansas after all the shenanigans that went down with his departure back in the day. Yeah, I've got Woo Pig getting beat pretty bad. I've got Tennessee winning 34-17. Now, we will see how that goes. You never know. But that goes with any of these SEC games, any of these SEC matchups. I think the only one that has zero doubt is Ole Miss versus Washington State. That's the only game on this week's slate that I have no question about. All right, now this one might be a hot take. Florida at Texas A&M. A&M is 7.5-point favorite per ESPN. The A&M run game is absolutely nasty. They are scary good. I think Marcel Reed, super talented. I think that entire wide receiver room, like, it's not the best wide receiver room in the world, but it has showed consistency. A&M's going hot. They're 5-0. And, you know, Mike Elko's just, after the Auburn win, he's thinking, can we stop being so gloomy and just look at the fact that A&M is 5-0 for the first time in forever? And right now, looking at A&M's schedule, and I think I mentioned this previously last week after A&M butchered Auburn, is just I can't look at a game on A&M's schedule and confidently pick one for them to lose. And I'd probably pick them in most every game that they play the rest of the year because I'd pick them against Texas right now. And I think that's probably their best competition that they have on the lineup. And that's not saying much because, like, again, also LSU. They've got to play LSU as well. But we'll see how that all goes. Now, A&M does have to lose 4 games this year. That is the way God has had it going for the longest time. A&M has to lose 4 games this year. That is how it works. Call me stupid for falling for the 8-4 curse, if you will. I don't really care. I've got an upset alert here. I have Florida to win in a close one there at Kyle Field. Home of the 12th man, 27-24. I think DJ Lagway pops out, improves off of last week's performance. Florida's got great momentum coming out of that win against Texas. I think that Florida defense is going to batten down the hatches to be even better. I think this is going to be a really fun game to watch. And I wish this was on another week so I could go down to Kyle Field and watch this because I've got some minor ties to the Gators. Don't mind watching them. I've got some family at Texas A&M. Just would be a great game to watch, I think. But I have Florida pulling this one out 27-24. Georgia at Auburn. Georgia, a 3.5-point favorite per ESPN. That little of a spread with the crap that we've seen Jackson Arnold do his first 2 SEC games, holding onto the ball, get his butt kicked. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this game. Jackson Arnold, not the guy. I think that both defenses are pretty solid. I think the Georgia defense will overrun Auburn's offense more so than Auburn's defense will run over Georgia's offense. I think it will be a defensive battle there in the first half, but eventually I think Georgia will pull away towards the end of the first half and really take over in the second half. I think Jackson Arnold will have his first turnover this game. I don't know how it's going to happen. Interception, fumble, I don't know. I think he will give up that first turnover, and it will be on something stupid. Either not holding onto the ball too long, which we already know he does, or a costly interception off a bad read and trying to force it somewhere, or just not knowing what he's looking at and not being aware of what the defenses are showing. So I have Georgia to win 27-10 in this one. All right, almost done. South Carolina at LSU. LSU's a 9.5-point favorite there in Death Valley. Both these teams have been such a disappointment to me so far. I was hoping that these would both be like scary guys to play coming in to their matchups against Oklahoma this season. LSU's run game is still bad, like it was last year. I think Nussmeier is still kind of hurt, and we don't know exactly how bad it is. I think their receiver room's great. Nick Anderson, as much as it pains me to say, lazy guy at Oklahoma. Blaming the health staff, which the injury situation last year was just terrible, and we had really bad luck. I don't think you can put it all on the health staff. And Bauer Sharp, worst tight end in Oklahoma history. I'm not actually that low on Bauer Sharp. It's just fun to talk about because, yeah, we hate Bauer Sharp at Oklahoma. Like, dude, the interception against LSU, you were already working for him before you transferred in that last game of the season. I think South Carolina's inconsistent. Lenore Sellers is good. This South Carolina defense is not nearly as good as it was last year. I do have LSU to win. I have them to cover 24-13. I don't think it's going to be dominant. I think it's just going to be, okay, they're both just playing ball. And it's not going to be an absolute monster masterclass of domination. Now, the game you've all been waiting for. The pick you've all been waiting for. Texas versus Oklahoma at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas at the State Fair. October the 11th, 2:30 p.m. Central Time in the year of our Lord 2025. Best day of the year. Best day of the year. So excited. I've not missed this game since I was 18 years old. Or no, I'm trying to think. I was there for Jalen Hurts. I missed 2020, and I've been to every one since then. So 2019, 21, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be my 6th Red River. Grew up watching it as a kid. Didn't go during COVID. Is what it is. Texas is currently a 1.5-point favorite. Yeah, sorry. ESPN, Vegas, you're stupid. Oklahoma's going to win. My prediction, 24-17. I think that this Oklahoma defense is going to have a field day. They're going to go after Arts. They're going to get after him. And they're going to mask the deficiencies. And I already talked about this. Mask the deficiencies in that Oklahoma secondary with youth and size when it comes to Cortland Guillory and Eli Bowen. Hopefully Gentry Williams can make it out of this one healthy. Please. Because he went down in 2023 injured. And 2024, he didn't even get to play because he was injured. I'm praying to see Gentry Williams see the end of this game. I love that guy and his dedication, all the crap he's had to go through. Same with Peyton Bowen when it comes to injuries. I love those guys. I want to see them stay in, and I want to see them do their job. I want Michael Boganowski to come in and take someone's head off. I can't wait. I think, and John's going to go nuts. Jaren's going to go nuts. Javonnie Gibson, Jaydn. It's going to be great. I don't think that this is going to, I think Oklahoma, I think this will look a lot like the Michigan game where Oklahoma's in control for most of it. Might have a couple big spots here and there where we make a mistake, let Texas get a little bit closer. I think Oklahoma will control this game. I think we're winning 24-17. And I think we both get a defensive touchdown. Yeah, I'll take that. I think both teams get a defensive touchdown. Jaren Kanak gets his first passing touchdown of the year. I think John Mateer will get his 11th straight game with both a rushing and a passing touchdown. That would be great. Just see him keep doing it. Love to see the dynamicness. I think I had trouble with that word. One of the previous pods we've done in the last week or so. But I think Oklahoma's going to do it. 24-17. You heard it here first. Well, Sooner Nation, that's going to do it for this edition of the Wacko Preview Podcast, where we break down all things OU football going into the weekend with the matchups coming up. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell button so you never miss an episode. Plus, go follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all at Wacko Sooners for live news updates, game time highlights, a couple of memes and reels. Texas Hate Week isn't over. We still got all day today. We still got all day Saturday. And we've got all day Sunday. After the game, after the win, all right? To razz Texas as much as we want. So go hit our follows, okay? So you stay in the Wacko loop at all times. Thank you all for joining us here on the Wacko Sooners podcast. And we will see you on Monday for our Wacko review coming out of the weekend and hopefully getting to talk about a great win down there in Dallas at the State Fair. So with that being said, Boomer Sooner.